is the CHGO Fire Podcast presented by Pointsbet. Use promo code CHGO when you sign up to get 2 risk-free bets up to $2,000. I am Pat McCraney. I am not in studio. I'm at home. He's Alex Campbell. He's also at home. Say hi,
Alex. A little different this week.
A little different. We had to switch things up because yesterday was the big Georg Heitz news conference. Alex was calling golf all week. He does have other interests outside of this, people. He's a golf announcer, and he's very good at it. And he does not work for any, how shall we put it, shady outfits. It's a pretty straightforward operation he's got going there. And then we wanted to, because this is the MLS trade deadline is 1 hour, actually 59 minutes from now. There's a transfer deadline. So if they wanted to bring in an international player, they could do that. There's another few hours to do that. But my sources are telling me it doesn't look like the Fire are going to bring in anybody by the trade deadline. They were looking for like a number 3 center back. They didn't want to tie up the cap too much because they're pretty tight up against the cap. So they wanted to try to find a number 3 center back, somebody who's maybe not as good as Amsberg or Tosaint, but is better than Mauricio Pineda in that position. They are not finding that right now. So
and that's really specific. Yeah, that's like a very tight window you're trying to get in there. And we don't exactly know how long Carlos Tosaint is going to be out. Like it's
4 weeks. Time. Yeah. 4 weeks is the number that Heitz gave yesterday.
Amsberg's going to be gone.
Right, right.
This is going to get back interesting, though. Again, we get kind of into the carousel of who plays center back. I mean, Pineda probably is the guy there with Jimenez in midfield.
Yep, I asked Ezra that yesterday. He confirmed Pineda, so it's going to be, it's probably going to be Mauri there for the time being. But yeah, it's now we're on our 3rd player playing alongside Rafa Shihus this season, so it's going to be interesting. And in the Tosaint injury is again the hamstring. You'll remember this is the thing that he had at the beginning of the season, which is why Wyatt Amsberg won the job to begin with, and he's got this again. So it seems like maybe a chronic thing for him. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, and it's just a freak thing that he got again. But not good when that went down. He was crying on camera, from what I'm told. I was at the stadium. I didn't see this because I'm far away in the press box. And Alex, you probably had some beers and maybe didn't notice, but on TV you could see that he was crying. So
he was also just at the other end of the field. I was sitting in the north end of the stadium, and so like you can see that he was clearly in some serious pain and in some significant distress. But it wasn't the sort of situation where it was obvious just how bad it was from where I was sitting.
The odd thing too, and we'll talk about this in a different context later, but I went to. I think at halftime of the Red Stars game, I popped in and the Fire were doing this autograph signing in the United Club during the Red Stars game. And Carlos was there taking photos, kissing babies, like super charismatic, super excited, walking just fine. But a hamstring is a weird thing. You can sometimes walk just fine, but you can't explosively run like you would need to be a professional center back. So, he's up and he's moving, unlike Amsberg, who's still kind of got the little scooter for his leg. But yeah, both of those guys are now out. We're down to Mauricio Pineda, which takes away from the depth in midfield, because Mauricio had done a very nice job in midfield, I thought, when Gaston was out, just as he did earlier this season when Federico Navarro was out.
Yeah, this might kill your Mauricio Pineda fun stat, because the Mauricio Pineda stat was only fun in that it was kind of showing that the Fire were better with him in that position than Gaston Jimenez. And now they're going to both be on the field, which means you're not going to be able to draw very much from it. And the Fire, to your point, are very, very thin now at both center back and in those defensive midfield spots. So definitely going to be a challenge as this team continues to float just below the playoff line. And we'll talk more later in the show about how crucial their next game is and how that picture will continue to shake out. But we do have, Pat, is it fair to say this is the biggest news story for the Fire this year in quite some time?
Yeah, I think this is bigger than signing Xherdan Shaqiri, which you would argue is the biggest news story of the year previously. This is I think the biggest transfer in club history. It's outgoing, but it is the biggest transfer. It's absolutely massive. 18-year-old goalkeeper Gaga Slonina. Look at the timing, Lawrence. Lawrence does you can't ask for better.
I'm here for you guys,
And you know what? Gaga, this is a good start, and somebody must have told him to do this, and this is a good way, with the English fans, it doesn't matter what club you're signing for. You always have to be very careful to be cognizant of avoiding getting commented for anything silly. Matt Turner did a good job of this when he signed for Arsenal. He didn't sign a Spurs shirt. Check
Yes,
out
I
the
loved
way
that.
honored is spelled at the start of this tweet.
I noticed this.
Gaga knows what he's doing there.
Yeah, that's very, very a nice little touch. It's he did a video for the Fire where he basically thanked a bunch of people. It was very, very touching video. I wrote a letter to him, like not to him, but to Chelsea supporters, letting them know who you're getting in this guy. And it's more than just, he's more than just a really, really talented goalkeeper prospect. He's a really, really talented goalkeeper prospect who happens to be a really good dude who's incredibly hardworking. Ezra pointed out yesterday that Gaga is almost always, and Georg backed this up too, almost always the first player there. He's in the weight room before everybody else. He's at the training ground before everybody else, and he stays later than everybody else. I've noticed this in the locker room too. He sits around sometimes and just waits, just being a part of the, experience of the post game, whether it's a win or a loss. Even I wrote the story after the Columbus game about the negative locker room vibe, and Gaga was there. He was almost like soaking in the loss, so he would know that feeling and not want to have that feeling again. He didn't want to run from it. He wanted to take it head on. And he's with what we saw with John Duran this week, making a misstep, where he said that he, doesn't want to play here anymore to somebody on Instagram. And it got picked up by Alex Calabrese and blown up because you cannot get things by him. It is interesting that these two are the same age, and Gaga would never do that. And the more normal thing for an 18-year-old who's frustrated and who gets fouled a lot and hasn't been playing as much as he would like is to sort of lash out on social media. You forget that Gaga's 18. You forget that he's a kid because he just doesn't do kid stuff. So if he does get to London and he does do something stupid, we can't forget that he's just a kid, but I don't think he will. I think he'll get there.
I don't either. I think, he's shown that he is incredibly mature for his age. Gaga's kind of been on this path for a while. He was the youngest signing in the history of Major League Soccer at age 14 when he signed that first professional deal that has since been eclipsed by a few people, but no one else who's in that kind of realm in recent years has, absorbed all that attention and pressure, I think, as well as Gaga has. And the fact that the Fire have not been particularly good on the field has also opened some doors. It's allowed them to, take a bit of a risk by, last year when Gaga is, only 16 and then 17 years old, allowing him to play some minutes. And now this year, having an 18-year-old be their first choice number one starter. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens here. The loan back is only for the rest of this season, which means if the Fire want him back next year, they're going to have to go through the allocation order, something a lot of teams are struggling with today. I think Toronto FC basically forgot it existed when they were like, oh yeah, let's just bring Richie Larea back in on loan, not realizing they needed about like 5 other things to happen for them to be allowed to do that. So that could get a little complicated in the offseason unless the Fire totally go in the tank and end up in last place in the league or down there, and it's easier to trade around. So that might be complicated and a bit costly to bring him back next year. I think that'd be great if he stuck around, because certainly he's not going to be playing for the Chelsea first team anytime soon. But given all the question marks and all the challenges that a situation like this presents, I think Gaga being so level-headed puts him in a position to be as well situated and prepared for everything that's going to come his way next as he possibly could be.
I actually think that I kind of hope that Gaga doesn't come back, and it, selfishly, it would be great to have him back, but I kind of hope for his development that he goes to he does a Chelsea loan thing like Chelsea loves to do, and he goes to a smaller club, or maybe he really does compete for like the number 2 job and gets Carling Cup games or Carabao Cup games or whatever that's called now. I kind of hope, and then I from the Fire standpoint, I hope they give the shot to Chris Brady.
That's the obvious thing, is to just transition that. Something we'll have to talk about down the stretch, I think we're going to touch on this later, is the Fire being in the playoff chase keeps that uncomplicated. As long as the Fire are prioritizing trying to win every game, Gaga's the number one, but we'll talk later. at what point does this get weird maybe about
Mm-hmm.
what makes the most sense for the Fire? But an awesome, huge move for Gaga. You mentioned $10 million, potential to rise to 15, biggest outgoing club transfer in history. I believe it's the second biggest sale of an MLS teenager, only to Alphonso Davies. That's a pretty small club of guys. Davies, I believe, was like 13 to rise to 20. So this is not a dissimilar deal.
What was Pepe's? I can't remember. Do you remember off the top of your head?
So that's going to be third biggest. You're right, because Pepe was like 20 million.
Yeah.
To Augsburg, because Augsburg paid way over the odds.
And interestingly, Pepe and Gaga have the same agent, a guy named Jaime from, I believe, from Spain.
Who did not get what he wanted here. He was acting very happy on social media yesterday. Jaime wanted the bigger agent check from Real Madrid on a peanuts transfer fee. This is more than 3 times what Real Madrid reportedly offered. Like this isn't even comparable. We agree it's a better situation for Gaga despite Pat's Arsenal allegiances. So yeah, we'll wait and see. And it is kind of nice that after weeks of waiting, much like Gaga's national team decision, although this hasn't seemed to have affected him personally as much in terms of how he's like dealing with all the pressure, it's nice to have this settled and now his focus can be squarely on his soccer.
It's got to be insane for him. It's just absolutely got to be insane to be an 18-year-old kid.
He flew to London the other day, signed some paperwork, took a few pictures with a jersey, and got on a plane back to Chicago. And now he's playing a soccer game this week.
I texted the guy at the Fire, and he's like, he's back. He's going to play this weekend. I'm like, come on, man. Like this kid, it's got to be insane. What a whirlwind. And I don't think this will affect him. I wrote earlier this season that if the U.S. men's national team needed to start him at Azteca, and I'm not joking here, I would feel okay with that. Maybe he's not the best choice, but I would trust him with that responsibility. That's how much faith I have in this guy. So unbelievable for him, unbelievable for the Fire. They've got to be excited. And I'm happy that the Fire, when the right offer came and it was right for Gaga and it was right for the club, they didn't, try to hold this up. It is MLS's place to let Gaga go be a top 5 league goalkeeper. So good for everybody involved.
Yeah, one note, somebody who doesn't seem to think this is a perfect situation, I actually earlier today listened to an interview that U.S. men's national team coach Greg Berhalter did with Paul Tenorio of The Athletic. And the question I think Paul posed was kind of about balancing the possible options that, for the third goalkeeper spot on the World Cup squad between Sean Johnson, Ethan Horvath, even a guy like Gaga. And Berhalter made it pretty clear that his preference is for players to do more like what Brandon Aronson is doing, where go to a club where you're going to play constantly, max out your level there, and then take the step to the next thing and climb that way, rather than going to the huge club and having to fight your way through the bureaucracy. And I think we'd all probably agree that that's a perfect world. But of course, the caveat here is, and I think we've talked about this on the show, Pat, there's only a few clubs in the world that can pay 8 figures for a teenage goalkeeper. There's like 5 teams that can justify that in their budget. Chelsea's one of them. So if Gaga's going to go, it's like when Alphonso Davies went to Bayern. When he was going to move, there was only a couple clubs that were going to be able to foot that bill. And so you kind of got to pick your poison with the super clubs here and hope that wherever Gaga ends up, likely on loan, is a situation in the league where he's going to be guaranteed minutes and he's going to be at a level that's low enough, so to speak, that he's not out of his depth, but high enough that it's not a waste of his time, doesn't see his development stall.
It makes perfect sense. And I hope it works out. I did ask Ezra yesterday. So let's say Gaga starts for Chelsea against Arsenal, and Ezra's a gigantic Arsenal fan. Like, let's say a guy starts against Arsenal for Chelsea, and Ezra said, "I love Gaga, but I love Arsenal more," and that touched me. And Lawrence, I feel like that probably made you feel warm and fuzzy inside too to hear such a thing.
I just love it. Oh my gosh, it is finally time that I think we should talk about that beautiful jersey behind your right shoulder and my hat.
It's an Henri 14 because, of course, it is.
Naturally.
My guy. Tomorrow's the Premier League opener.
It is.
Hopefully it'll be better than Brentford, which I was just reminded of last night when I watched Arsenal All or Nothing on Amazon Prime. It is out now. First 3 episodes just dropped. So
I haven't dived in yet, but that's going to happen later today. I'm going to be angry. That was not a good time.
I was mad. Yeah. I was mad when they were just kind of going through the first 3 matches when they, of course, went lost 2-0, lost 2-0, and then lost 5-0. Brentford, Chelsea, and Man City.
Yeah. For the record, I think Arsenal's going to finish above Chelsea in the league this year. I've got Chelsea outside the top 4 in fifth just because I think they're going to be. I think it's going to take, with the status of Chelsea's squad and everything, I think it's going to take them a few months to figure out what they're doing. And you just can't have a month or two where you stumble with how strong the top of the Premier League is. So I have both Spurs and Arsenal getting into the top 4 this year. I think Gabriel Jesus is going to be a really, really good piece of business.
I hope so. But, Arsenal was literally bottom of the league after 3 matches. And I thought, this team's terrible. And they should have finished top 4. They should have finished top 4, and then they pooped down their pants in the last 3 matches. Okay.
Yeah.
What do you got for us?
Anyway, you know what? Georg Heitz talked yesterday to the media for the first time in I think since the Shaqiri transfer was the last time he spoke to the media. So it had been a while.
He's been an elusive man.
And I will say, from a PR standpoint, scheduling it right after the announced sale of Gaga was probably better timing for the club than scheduling it after the Columbus match when I wanted him fired. So
yeah, probably.
Well done, PR team. But there were a lot of national writers on the call, and obviously Gaga was, the hot topic and everybody wanted to know. But we also asked some other questions. We asked about transfers. He didn't think it was, he said maybe, but it's a tough market yesterday. So that seems to be the same thing I'm hearing from the club today. By the way, about as we record this live, about another 40 minutes left. But things could change.
I do have Twitter open, so if Tom Bogert comes through here and throws some sort of bomb, really, if we get any really interesting MLS news, fire or otherwise, while this podcast is going, we'll at least mention it.
Yeah,
but
awesome.
It looks like the craziest stuff is over. Ricky Puig to LA Galaxy from Barcelona. Matt Miazga, not official yet, but is going to FC Cincinnati. Those seem to be the two biggest things we're going to see today.
Is he going on loan to FC Cincinnati from Chelsea, or is that
no? As I understand it,
is it experiment finally over?
It is a permanent transfer. Yeah, I think it's hilarious. This is an aside, but I had some fun asking some other soccer fan friends a couple months ago, what club is Matt Miazga currently contracted to? Who does he currently play for? And the disbelief people have that he is still technically a Chelsea player after he was most recently on loan at Alaves, a club where things started very well, and then they got relegated, and it was a little less fun for everybody involved, and that took Miazga out of the U.S. men's national team picture. I think that's he's one of those guys who's on my list of just Americans who need to get back to MLS because it's just better for the national team in theory, and that's really all I care about. It's very, very selfish of me to put that ahead of those players' individual career wants and desires. So yeah, it's been a bit of an interesting day in MLS, but yeah, it doesn't look like the Fire are going to be participating much.
One of the things that I thought was interesting about Heitz is I asked him a very similar question to the one I asked Ezra a couple of weeks ago, where I'm like, Ezra, what have you learned? What's gone well? What would you change? And Ezra, I asked that in the weekly news conference that they do. And Ezra answered for the next 5 minutes about all of the things that he would take back, what he would change, what he's done well, what he's learned, how he's grown. It was I posted as I was deciding how to cut it up for a web story on CHGO, I decided, you know what, I'm going to post the entire answer because it was that good. So I thought Ezra was very reflective and very interesting to listen to. Heitz said, I don't judge myself. That's maybe for the media to do, but I don't judge myself. But he did he did judge Ezra, and he says Ezra's doing a pretty good job. Again, Heitz loves Gaston Jimenez. High praise for Gaston. He also says that Shaqiri's been very good, and his hamstring injury getting better has improved him. And he says, even though we haven't really seen Jairo do much, he says Jairo has been very good too. So he had praise for all of his DPs, which I think fans would maybe disagree with at times. I don't think Gaston's been terrible, but I don't know that he's been a DP level. Jairo's barely played because of the hip injury that he was taking drugs for in Mexico. And I do think the Fire are doing the right thing there by trying to get him right. And then Shaqiri's been pretty good the last couple of games, but I don't think Shaqiri's had a great season. I don't think anybody would say that, but maybe Heitz. So
yeah, Jairo Torres has like long-term income potential. Like if Jairo comes good, that's a guy who he's young.
I wouldn't say he's a bust or anything. No.
Whereas like Shaqiri, it's, he was the only way Shaqiri was going to live up to $8.5 million a year is to be an MVP candidate. And he's not been that. So, if that's the standard we're judging it by, very good would not have been enough. And he's been
exactly
good for a couple of weeks. And if he keeps this level the rest of the season and the Fire maybe sneak into the playoffs, then you can maybe say he would have been worth, what Gaston makes at $4 or $5 million a year, but not 8.5. And Gaston's a solid
Gaston's
player.
less than that. I think Gaston's in the 2.
Oh yeah, sorry, I'm thinking of his transfer fee. So I guess my
right.
point would be that Shaqiri, I think, is on pace to maybe be worth $4 or $5 million of salary, but not 8.5. And Gaston's fine, but he's not a designated player. And I was among those keeping out hope that maybe we would see him get bought out this summer, but maybe the Fire just don't think they could have gotten a deal done for a significant enough upgrade in a short turnaround time in the summer that they figure it's just better to wait to the offseason, which if Gaston Jimenez is still playing for this team in 2023, I think half the fan base might just implode.
Again, I think that he's judged on that DP label, and I don't think that he is as bad as some people think, although there are moments where he doesn't track back, which is fun to pick on.
He's been better about that. Like that was very memeable early in the year. Him and Shaqiri have kind of been on similar wavelengths of like getting it together more.
Shaqiri had one over the weekend where he walked his ass back, threw his arms up in the air. He's frustrated about something. He was down on the end line in his attacking third, and he walked his ass back. At one point, I think he was probably 40 yards offside, just because he was just not interested in. He was mad about something. He was pissed about something. And he's like, I'm not going to get back there and defend now. And that's the kind of thing that annoys me. It really does.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about that game for a few minutes. And I think we'll definitely kind of maybe pick around a bit, something that we might be frustrated about with when the Fire are attacking, that Shaqiri might feel similarly about, that things just at times aren't quite right.
Perhaps, though, Alex, we should do a little bit of business right now.
Yes.
You think it's time? The best way, Alex, for you to support CHGO is to download the Pointsbet app and use code CHGO when you sign up. If you do that right now, you'll get 2 risk-free bets up to $2,000, but that's not it. If you make a $50 or more first-time deposit, you'll receive a free CHGO membership, which unlocks all of our web content, and you'll even get a free shirt of your choice from the CHGO locker. That's $2,000 in free bets, a free CHGO membership, and a free t-shirt from the CHGO locker, all for making more than a $50 first-time deposit at PointsBet. If you have any questions, you can email pointsbet@allchgo.com and we'll help you out. Your home for live in-play betting just got even better. See an edge in the game you're watching? Is your favorite team primed for a comeback? Don't just watch the game. Bet along with it live. More live betting, more live markets, and faster live cash outs. Follow along with your bets the moment they hit and stay in the live action all game long. Download the PointsBet app right now and use promo code CHGO. What are you waiting for? It's time to elevate your live betting game. Once the game starts, don't just bet. Live your bet life with PointsBet. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call 1-800-GAMBLER for crisis counseling and referral services.
And as I do every week, I have to tell you about Owen, OWYN, which stands for Only What You Need. Owen is a 100% plant-based protein shake that gives you nutrition that works as hard as you do. All of their products are free of artificial ingredients, and they're allergen-friendly, including being gluten and dairy-free, making them easily digestible. I first heard about Owen from Bears quarterback Justin Fields, who himself follows a plant-based diet. And Owen and CHGO have partnered up to give you an awesome offer. You can get 20% off your first purchase at liveowen.com. That's liveown.com with the code CHGO20. That's code CHGO20. So join me and Justin Fields in trying Owen, only what you need. Pat, we were at that doubleheader this past weekend, the Fire and the Red Stars. Maybe not the game results we wanted exactly. There's a good look at some of our crowd at the CHGO tailgate. Thanks so much to everybody who came out and said hello. The whole Waldron deck was a good time. Tailgates, it was like just one giant tailgate, that entire parking lot.
Yeah, it was a party atmosphere. I do love tailgating on top of the Waldron deck. It's a lot of fun. And you're only going to get to do that two more times this season for Fire games, because the other 3 are now going to be at SeatGeek. There was another one announced today. The August 21st game against NYCFC is now going to be at SeatGeek because the Fire expect the pitch at Soldier Field to be unplayable, as we saw last year against. Yeah.
It's some
counterpoint. When is it not unplayable?
I was going to say some coaches and players in the league would say it's always unplayable.
It was pretty bad this last weekend. I'll tell you that. They had just laid down fresh sod, and probably because the Bears needed fresh sod, and there's really no consideration for the Fire at that place. It feels like half the time. I will tell a funny story about this. The Fire locker room was closed because the Fire were sharing their locker room with the San Diego Wave, and the Atlanta was sharing their locker room with the Red Stars. I think they put a curtain or some kind of divider up.
Why not? Weird. Well, anyway.
Well, there's a third locker room there, but the Bears wouldn't allow anybody to use that. So apparently that went unused. So
and we could have used someone being in Club Dub. I got to be honest. Shout out to the last regime. Hopefully they change that.
Club Dub.
Give the Red Stars Club Dub next time. Anyway, you were saying, Pat.
Yeah. So there was a locker room that was not in use because there's not really. I don't feel like Soldier Field and the Park District give consideration to the Fire for much of anything there. If the Bears want something, they get it. And so the turf was garbage. Ezra called it sticky. Atlanta had one good chance in the first half.
Right at the end of the first half, Thiago Almada, for what they're paying him and what they paid for him. Holy crap, does he have to finish that chance? I mean, it is wide open. Gaga is just laying out his arms and legs because there's nothing he's going to do. The whole defense is beat. All Almada's got to do is just lift this a little bit and tuck it into the opposite corner of the net, and he misses it by like 5 yards. It was just a howler of a miss, and Atlanta did almost nothing before that, and then in the second half, they just didn't seem to give much of a crap at trying to do anything.
And the Fire, and you talked about this, Alex, the Fire, when they go forward, they do a weird thing when they get into the final third.
Yeah, they get everybody kind of forward, and they almost set up like they're trying to play basketball. And we use the case in point for those who watched is the goal that gets disallowed by Shaqiri. The Fire do this thing where they get everybody real close up, and they try to hit these very precisely timed passes toward the end line for one of the usually the 3 behind the striker. So in this case, Shaqiri, Mueller, or Torres. They're looking to time a ball perfectly so that person can get in behind the defense, cut it back across the 6, and create chances. And we saw them do this a few times. The problem is opponents know this, and it's really easy to stop. And all you have to do is you have to wait. You just have to wait for that run, wait for that pass to about to come, and everyone's just got to step. And the result is that on that goal, I don't think anybody in the stadium really realized because it was kind of hard to tell. What happens is Chris Mueller is wide open because he's offside, because the entire defense has realized what's going on. So Shaqiri finishes that chance. Everybody goes nuts. It goes to VAR. Mueller's offside, not by much, but just the Fire, they've got all these really dynamic players, especially when John Duran rhymes, tall, young Colombian guys. When John Duran is playing, it's such a dynamic group of players, and that works really well. And we've seen it when, those games where Duran scores a couple of goals, there's all this movement and this pressing. But man, when the Fire get in the attacking third, everyone's just kind of standing around and walking. And especially on a field that is sticky, like Ezra described, it just doesn't lead to much of anything. And even against a team like Atlanta, who can't defend for crap right now, and they've got a bad goalkeeper, the Fire aren't getting almost any shots on target because all you've got to do is bunker and make sure you hold your line to maintain an offside trap. You shouldn't be able to get offside trapped within 5 yards of the goal. That's just shouldn't be a thing. But the Fire do it regularly, and that goal that gets disallowed was like a particularly annoying example of, man, this should really be a goal. You shouldn't get caught doing this.
Yeah, it was one where there was that initial, oh, Shaq scored, and then you see the replay and you're like, no, that's not even close. It's definitely getting called back. So there was and that was the only moment that fans really had to celebrate in either game, because that was it, right? There were no goals at all in the first game. There was one goal in the Red Stars game, and it was scored by the other team. So
yes, 17-year-old Jaden Shaw, who had been a member of the San Diego Wave for like 3 days, scores for San Diego. Mallory Pugh misses a penalty late on, and any energy that was left in that stadium, all the air went out of the balloon when Kalen Sheridan stops that penalty. The Red Stars, I mean, this is just a brief aside. I'm worried about the Chicago Red Stars, if I'm honest. Their lack of any defensive depth continues to be really, really concerning. The way they operate in possession is basically just expecting Mallory Pugh to just do it all herself. When you play a team that's got a center back combo of Naomi Gurma and Abby Dahlkemper, that's just not gonna fly. Yeah, and I got kind of excited this week. I saw that Hannah Davison, former Red Stars center back, former Northwestern center back, who played basically her entire career as Kayla Sharples' center back partner, announced she was leaving Swedish club AIK.
Yes.
Which is where she had gone when she left the Red Stars, only for it to turn out yesterday that she signed for Rangers in Scotland. So that feels like a missed opportunity for the Red Stars, who are in desperate need of defensive help right now. And I think it's going to be a grind for them to maintain their playoff position. And it's really just disappointing, like as a Chicago soccer person, you want a day like that to be a great advertisement for the sport. And neither team played in a fashion that's going to get a lot of neutrals to come back.
It is a thing that I feel like every soccer person in this country who is trying to convert other people to be soccer people gets frustrated with, because like when you go watch a World Cup final and it's 0-0 for 120 minutes and goes to PKs, it's frustrating when there are no goals, because that is the thing that they lob at us about why they hate our sport is, well, there's no scoring. And it's obviously not always true, but on Saturday it was.
Yeah, and this is up against, there was data that came out today. The audience for the UEFA Euro final between England and Germany peaked at over 1 million viewers in the United States. That's for a insane women's soccer game in which the U.S. were not playing. So there's this really weird disconnect right now. The Red Stars attendance is the lowest it's ever been, basically, since they moved to SeatGeek. And yet, women's soccer broadly is as popular as it's ever been, and only getting more popular going into a World Cup next year. Now, some of this is certainly because the Red Stars aren't exactly marketing themselves particularly strongly or well off the field right now, and there are reasons for that we don't need to get into on this podcast. But yeah, it's just, again, from a Chicago soccer perspective, it just feels like that team is missing so much right now, because it feels like the Fire struggles. We can look at, oh man, some of these signings haven't been very good. Some of the money hasn't been very well spent. They've been digging out of a hole for forever. And it's just, you look at the NWSL right now, and Angel City are packing Bank of California. San Diego Wave are moving into a college football stadium that they're going to probably draw pretty well at. It's just, you see these atmospheres in Seattle and Portland, and even what Kansas City's got going. And I see someone saying you need more companies to invest in ads, and I'll say on that, you need to call those companies to ask. And as far as I'm aware, there's very little calling being done right now, looking for people to promote the team. They're going to play on TV here in Chicago this weekend, so if you can, turn in on WCIU, Channel 26, to watch the Red Stars this weekend. But that was supposed to be a team in-market TV deal, and this is going to be like the second game they've shown all season. So it's just, you really hope that the hardcore fans who've supported this team find ways to stick with it, even if they don't feel appreciated all the time. And I think they will, because the Red Stars fans and those players have a really strong connection, especially the core of that team that's been built up for a while. And I'm rambling a bit here, but I'm just saying, I think when these days can't be taken advantage of because the soccer's not very good, I think that hurts the Red Stars more than it hurts the Fire, because the Fire have, silly amounts of money, and there's always the opportunity that they can, in theory, turn things around pretty quickly. We got to talk about, but in theory,
in talking about the Red Stars and the Fire, I think the overall event was, despite the product on the field, good. I think it's
especially on the Lala weekend to get 25,000 people through the door when Lala's going on a couple blocks away. That, for any event, that's pretty successful.
However, there's a bit of controversy during the Red Stars game, because the Fire decided to hold a season ticket holder event where you could meet the players and get photos and autographs from them. I went down there for it at halftime, and it seemed like every Fire player was pretty much there. Yeah, even Carlos Tiran, who was hurt. Bornstein wasn't, but he has COVID or is on health and safety protocol, so he wasn't there. But basically, everybody who had played in the game was down there, and there was a long line of fans. And I didn't think anything of it at the time, but then people started to say, well, that was disrespectful by the Fire to draw people away from the Red Stars, and I can kind of see that point.
Yeah, it's not a good look. And you can argue about how much you blame the club for that, how much you blame the fans, because it does kind of stink to see. There was a lot of good energy, particularly in the South End, during that Fire game, and I think that really, it drew that stark line. This is something we knew, Pat, going into this weekend. This is very bizarre. And again, this is for another podcast to dive into why. There is very little overlap between Red Stars fans and Fire fans. And that makes no sense. Just broadly doesn't make any sense. And what we saw very clearly there happen is the people who were there for the Fire, a lot of them filed out and went and waited in a ridiculously long line rather than watching soccer. They spent the entire first half, if not more, of that Red Stars games standing in a line rather than watch the other Chicago team that was playing, rather than support that team. So part of it is absolutely on the Fire. You could have done this any game that's at Soldier Field. I'm surprised they didn't do this a bit further in the season toward the end, kind of as like a thank you to the fans.
It's a cool idea.
No, the idea is good. The execution of the event itself was good. But why are you doing this today? Why aren't you doing this literally any other time? And it's just, there's just, between the clubs, between the fan bases, there's this weird chasm between these two teams. And Chicago soccer is only going to be at its strongest if everybody's pulling their rope in the same direction, so to speak. And it's like, I would like to see a world where, again, not to invoke a very hard standard to match, but look at what's going on in LA. Angel City move into that stadium, and the 3252 are there, just as strong, just as loud, just as raucous, as they are for LAFC games. So it's possible. You can do it. There's not like some weird barrier.
That's the frustrating thing, Alex, we say this on this show all the time. I harp on this all the time, but there are a lot of soccer fans in the Chicago area, and there is a giant disconnect, not only between the two teams, the two pro teams, but also between those fans and MLS, between those fans and the NWSL. It's fractured and weird in ways here that it isn't in other cities. I have ideas as to why a lot of people were turned off by the Fire for so long, and losing and being actively pushed away by, previous administrations there will do that. And there's a whole different thing going on with the Red Stars, obviously, but it can be so much better here. And I will say there were three groups of people in the stands this weekend. There were Fire fans, there were Red Stars fans, and there were Alex Morgan fans. And there were a lot of Alex Morgan fans there.
But that's, again, this is the thing. And we talked about this before. The Fire found this out when Chicharito came to town. Mm-hmm. And this has been one of those things that I think the Fire is starting to turn the ship on, but yes, being good is important. But in a salary capped league, where all the big revenue piles, all the big buckets are just split up and handed out to people. Where can you get a margin for you? Like if you're running a business, let's be really cynical here for a moment. Your margin, the thing you keep, one of the only things you keep, all for yourself is your match day revenue. That's yours. And so you got to put butts in seats. And not only are San Diego a very good expansion team, Jill Ellis is the head of soccer ops for them, former U.S. Women's National Team coach, and they're coached by Casey Stoney, who used to coach Man United Women. So just very qualified soccer people. They knew what they were doing, and they've got some weird problem with their Nike deal that they don't have interesting merch of any kind, but they sell a shitload of it, pardon my French, because Alex Morgan plays on the team. And you look at when the Galaxy come here, Chicharito sells. We've harped before that the Fire didn't sign a Mexican player for 12 years. Despite that, if you were to, ask the question, who is the, I guess, median Chicago soccer fan, they're likely Latino and likely root for the Mexican men's national team.
It's fair. Yeah.
There's just own goals that you cannot make. And again, Jairo Torres is a step in the right direction. Finally investing in the academy and seeing players who are from Black neighborhoods and players who are from Latino neighborhoods advance through the academy, get opportunities in the first team, especially for kids who play soccer in Chicago, seeing players on their team who look like them, who are from where they're from. Huge strides being made on the Fire side of things in that regard. But yeah, again, it's a lesson. How do you put butts in seats? And, maybe the Fire don't, or the Red Stars, maybe that's not a top priority, but you've got to look at what are the highest attendances for each of those teams' games this year. And it is because a star international striker was in the building on the other team.
Very, very famous player on the other team. That's true. I think it's time for the Pointsbet pick of the week. I don't know. Did you pick one out? I have some in mind if you didn't pick one out.
I think I've got a few because I myself, for personal reasons, was looking at the betting landscape of the Premier League this weekend. I think we can maybe tip our hat to something I said earlier. I said I think Gabriel Jesus is going to be a really good signing for Arsenal this year. I think he's going to score against Crystal Palace on Friday, tomorrow, if you're listening to this on Thursday, today, if you're listening to this on Friday. So my gut instinct is Gabriel Jesus to be an anytime goal scorer in the Arsenal match against Crystal Palace.
What's the number on that? What's the line on that right now?
I will have to double check because, again, I failed to write it down. Oh, there's the PointsBet dashboard there.
I got you guys.
I got it right here. He's plus 150.
Yeah. Look on the screen, Patrick. It's right there.
I think that's good value. Crystal Palace are a decent side, coached obviously by Arsenal legend Patrick Vieira. It's going to be interesting to see what they do without Chelsea's Conor Gallagher, who kind of ran the show for them in midfield last year. But I think just, you can't take that much from preseason. It's football. Football is like American football in that preseason basically irrelevant. And we've seen teams win Super Bowls in the NFL who went 0-4 in the preseason.
You're telling me I should not be
Jesus
excited?
Looks really good.
Yeah, this is my whole, and I'm sure Lawrence has gone through it too. This is my whole dilemma. He looks insane this preseason. Arsenal dismantled Chelsea in Orlando,
and then dismantled Sevilla, who Sevilla sold both of their center backs, which generally bad strategy.
Oh yeah, that's probably why they shipped 6.
But it's been dangerous because I do not let myself. I'm past the point of getting excited about the Fire. Like I'm just like mildly amused with the Fire, and if they ever do something, great. But with Arsenal, I get a little more emotionally invested because I don't know the Arsenal people. I mean, and I'm excited, and that's dangerous because it's going to be.
Come on, it's match 1. Arsenal sucks for the last decade in the first match.
See, you guys just have PTSD because
that's the thing.
Arsenal keep getting these Friday night opener matches. And why does this keep happening to Arsenal specifically?
Palace is a bogey team. They never beat Palace. This is not going to go well.
I know they lost at Palace in the stretch of games that they needed to.
Is Palace everyone's bogey team? Because they're also a Chelsea bogey team.
It's Patrick Vieira. At least there's that.
Yeah.
By the way, outrights for the Premier League, Man City is minus 150 to win the league.
Woof. Yeah, I looked at that today. I'm like, well, that's boring and not worth my time.
Liverpool's plus 250 and everything gets higher after that. Tottenham's plus 1,000. I'll give you a bit of I'm going to give you a hardcore bit of betting advice here. don't bet on Tottenham to win the league.
I don't think they're going to win the league. I think Tottenham is going to run the duopoly closest because Antonio Conte is a very good manager. He's in his second full season there. If you look at the clubs he's been at over the last decade, this is when his teams peak. City and Liverpool, they were just too damn good. Like Harry Kane could score 25, 26 goals, and it still won't matter.
If the bet was maybe we'll put the pressure on for a little bit and there will be a DVD commemorating us doing that, then it's a good bet for Tottenham. But otherwise...
All right, so what's the Pointsbet pick of the week? What are we going? Are we going with Jesus?
Jesus plus 150, I think. Anytime goals.
That's
pretty good about that.
I like it. I'm actually going to do that.
Because I could see it being like a 2-2 or unfortunately a 3-2 Palace type thing. I don't know.
Palace are such a mystery. Like they could lose 5-0 or Andre Ayew could roll back 10 years and score 3. Like you don't know what you're getting.
Arsenal opening match.
Yeah, again, last year was weird.
We're here
already. Canio's game. They're against Brentford.
All right, guys. The Fire plays Charlotte this weekend.
Yeah, let's look at the
Charlotte. Let's do that.
Look at the standings. Man.
It's pretty self-evident. This game's important.
Well, there you go. Charlotte's in 7th, 29 points. Fire in 10th on 27 points. A win, depending on what happens with Miami and Cincinnati, would vault the Fire into the 7th and final playoff spot in the Eastern Conference, which would be a very good thing. A loss would be a very bad thing.
And I think it's worth noting here, Pat, before we get more into the weeds, this being trade deadline day, what all these teams are doing. New England is fire selling. New England is into the tank. So the New England Revolution, Josie Altidore went to Mexico. Sebastian Lletget went to FC Dallas. Matt Turner's gone. Adam Books is gone. That team's going nowhere. Carles Hill's not going to be there next year because he's not going to sit around for that. DC remained terrible. They're just a really bad soccer team. Cincinnati going for it. Like I said, bringing in Matt Miazga. I think they are headed in the right direction. Brenner is scoring goals, which is like a crazy thing to watch. Brandon Vasquez might play his way onto the U.S. squad for the World Cup with the way he's currently scoring. So I think Cincinnati is a team to be feared. Charlotte, though, they have had weird turmoil. They fired their manager really early in the season because him and the sporting director don't like each other. Their highest paid player, Karol Swiderski, a Polish attacker, has been maybe the worst DP in Major League Soccer this year. And yet, they are somehow above the playoff line. I don't get it.
Bronico. It's the Bronico effect. But yeah, he's getting a lot of minutes and he seems to be doing a nice job. That it's going to be interesting because it's the first time the Fire have obviously played there. It's as far as who I'm, you alluded to this a little bit ago, but the team that I'm most worried about is actually Toronto. I could see
Toronto's going to climb. It's just a question of how fast can they climb, and two, are they going to score enough goals to offset how many they're going to ship? Because I don't think I've ever seen a team in soccer, men's, women's, MLS, Europe, anywhere with a much of a split between how good the attack is and how bad the defense is. Toronto is going to have to try to win games 5-4. That's why I don't think they're going to get there, because that strategy, it doesn't work. No soccer team has ever succeeded by playing that way, because eventually your attackers are just going to get exhausted. Eventually you just turn into what Leeds United were under Marcelo Bielsa. Everybody just runs out of gas, and it's like, nah, that's enough of this. That's enough of this BS. We're done. So I don't think Charlotte's going to stay there. I think Cincinnati is really the team there to be afraid of, which again is why I dropped points against Cincinnati earlier this year. Could come back to haunt the Fire. That being said, because I don't think Charlotte's going to hang around, if you're going to make the playoffs, you have to beat the non-playoff teams. And through that prism, you've got to beat Charlotte.
Exactly. Miami, what do we feel like? They're on a little bit of an uptick right now, but do we really believe in Miami? That's kind of the thing. This is there for the
Toronto situation. Their attack is starting to fire. Julian Carranza, that was a smart piece of business there. Gonzalo Higuain is scoring goals. Again, they're under severe financial penalty, and it doesn't seem to matter. But I don't trust Miami. I don't trust a team who says their biggest game in club history is a friendly against Barcelona where the coach subs on his son and the owner's son to play in a game where they're losing like 9-0.
Why not? What's wrong with that? So, yeah, it's a 6-pointer again. Like the Fire have a lot of these coming up, which is the good news for the Fire. If you're going to make the playoffs, you've got to beat the teams that you're directly battling, and this is yet another one. Do we think they go in there and get a point? How are we feeling? Are you feeling pretty? Mauricio Pineda. We know Mauricio's
like
going
a
to start
game
center
where
back. Yeah.
I feel like this is going to look a lot like the Atlanta game. I feel like it's going to be kind of a drag. It's going to be interesting to see who starts up top. John Duran makes the Fire more exciting going forward, and I think opens up the possibilities. But given his behavior this week, I won't be surprised if he is on the bench.
Interesting.
And if we see Kasper Shabilko instead, does Jairo Torres keep his spot? Does Brian Gutierrez come back in? I think for now, I'd rather see Guti be starting and Jairo in that kind of super sub fresh legs kind of position, whether it's for Gutierrez or Shaqiri or, on the Shaqiri note, I think a big thing for the Fire down the stretch, Pat, clearly there's games where Shaq's in and there's games where Shaq's out. He doesn't get subbed seemingly regardless, unless he asked to be subbed. And I think the thing that's going to be really crucial down the stretch is Ezra Hendrickson. In those days where it doesn't look like, especially in the second half, that Shaq's fully with it, Ezra's got to be willing to take him off the field because there have been
especially if Guti's there on the bench.
Right. Yeah. There have been games this year where the Fire would have been better served with Jairo Torres in for Shaqiri with Gutierrez and Mueller. Just down the stretch. That's just been a thing. Or even, hey, throw Victor Becerra out there. Give the kids a shot because we've seen these games too many times, like the Atlanta game, where it's clear it's not working. And the Fire are starting to get to that point in the season where you have to risk losing to try and win.
I like that quote. You have to risk losing to try to win.
I didn't come up with it. I don't know where I first heard it, but that's just, we're at the business end of the season. Like, no one cares if you get 1.1 points a game and miss the playoffs by 2 games, especially
I love that.
In a market where we've seen, going back to attendance, when the Fire are good, they draw. When they're not, they don't.
I still think that in year 3 of this rebuilding project, and I know we've rebuilt the rebuild, but at one point, but in year 3 of this project, the fact that the goal remains just making the playoffs is incredibly frustrating and annoying. It is
in the league where half the teams in the league make the playoffs.
It is harder to miss the playoffs than it is to make it. And the bar for the Fire is still, even at the beginning of the season, when you ask them, well, we think we can make the playoffs. Come on. It's got to be better than this. It's absolutely got to be better than this.
And
you're spending that kind of money.
But the other thing is we can't view the Fire sneaking into 7th, which remains very possible. We can't view the Fire sneaking into 7th as some sort of, oh, yeah, this is working. Because 7th, 8th, this team is still kind of stagnant. It is still clearly lacking that next push forward. And again, there's going to be big questions this offseason, like there's been for several off seasons. Now, maybe you've raised the floor for this team, but clearly it's not where Hendrickson, Heitz, Mansueto would like it to be right now. And again, I'm not surprised by the quotes we've heard mid-season, whether it's Mansueto, whether it's Heitz. Everyone's saying what you would expect them to say, and they're going to keep doing that until the season ends, regardless of how it goes.
I do not expect.
And in the off season, there's got to be those questions asked. Now what? You're at this level. You're a mid-table Eastern Conference team. How do you get better than that? What are you doing to be better than that? And we're going to see down the stretch of this season, Pat, if the Fire are indeed mid-table or if they're closer to still, grasping at spoons down at the other end.
Because the opposite type of club in this league is Seattle, who, they, after winning CONCACAF Champions League, they were out of the playoff picture for a while, and you just knew that they were going to get back in it, and they're in 7th right now. They've got a game in hand over Nashville, who's in 6th. Seattle's going to make the playoffs because they always
don't look very good. And they have not played good soccer all year. No. They are injury riddled. But would you want to play that team in the playoffs? I wouldn't.
No, that's the thing. They're at their worst after they won the biggest trophy in North American club soccer. They're at their worst, and they're still better than the Fire, who are on a surge right now. This is not a short-term thing. This is not even like an Ezra thing. This is a big picture over the last few years. There have been some failures that are still enormously frustrating, considering you have an owner who's all in and willing to spend whatever, and it's still not right. And I don't think anybody's expecting MLS Cup contender every year, but when you can't even make the playoffs, when you're just battling to make the playoffs, you're fighting and clawing your way back in. Even if they make it, that's not a sign of success. That's not a measure. If they make it and win a few games, maybe we would call it that, right? Or maybe if they go on a huge run and they surge up to 5th or 4th somehow, which they're not going to, but somehow you might call that success. But the bar has to be higher than this. It just does. It's just not good enough. Even with
this weekend with beating Charlotte.
Even with a 10.4 game run, which is great. You beat Charlotte, maybe there's more to it. But I'm not speaking short term. Like, obviously short term, they've been fantastic in the last 4 games, even though you wouldn't say they were great against Atlanta. Still 10 points in 4 games. Great. I'm talking big picture. Maybe it's finally turning the corner for good, but I'll believe it when it actually happens.
Yeah, and it's just there needs to at least be some symmetry, because, and I've marked this out as like the inflection point before. The flame, not pardon the pun, the flame went out when Georgi Mihailovic tore his ACL against the New York Red Bulls. That was the high point the club had been at, even though they were kind of, they were great in the middle of the season. They kind of limped into the playoffs, but like that season was something. And then that moment where Georgie's down on the field crying in the rain, that was the end of it. And it was straight off a cliff after that. And this team has yet to return to that point. And until they do, at minimum, it's hard to say anything's successful. But hey, big game this weekend. Hopefully next week we're talking about 13 points in 5 games and the Fire being above the playoff line. That's something.
Yeah, that's something. And I would, when you're looking for little victories, I think that would be pretty great. To at least there'd be reason to believe and have hope. Like, if you think about it, this weekend could go sort of like Arsenal. It could swing in very different directions. If the Fire win this game, I say the word and you pop up like a genie.
Yeah, I know. I'm the Arsenal genie. I'm just waiting to hear what you're going to say that is negatively affecting Arsenal.
If the Fire win this weekend, I think fans can have a lot of hope. If the Fire, draw or even lose this weekend, a loss would be not catastrophic, just like it wouldn't be for Arsenal, but it'd be pretty depressing.
Also, a final Seattle note, Brian Schmetzer just confirmed that they were indeed trying to sign Luis Suarez. So that's the kind of club Seattle Sounders are operating over there right now.
Whoa.
So on that note,
is he still worth $40 million in £1? Or no? Is he still worth $40 million in £1?
Don't do that. Don't do that. We don't,
I was really rooting for him to go to LA.
Still
watch
hurts
him and
me.
Chiellini have to walk into a room together.
I didn't want him anyways. I was like, get him out of here. I was annoyed they even made the offer.
Well, hopefully the Fire are on their way to changing their ways, kind of like Arsenal have been. Arsenal don't do that crap anymore. They actually sign real players now.
Yeah.
I'm excited, guys.
Pray for Bukayo Saka's ankles.
And also,
all right,
I think Pulisic doesn't play it all the next few months, and it means he's healthy for the World Cup, so be it.
Bright point. That's true. Yep. Because it's not like he's going to miss the roster. So, yeah, we don't want a Christian Pulisic soft tissue injury in like late October. That wouldn't be a good thing. So,
wouldn't be bad.
All right, Alex, you usually do the farewell on this show. You should probably take care of that.
We've gone a bit long today, but I think it's appropriate given it was a big weekend last weekend in Chicago soccer. It's a big day in Major League Soccer with the trade deadline, and it's a big point in the season for the Fire, and it kind of feels like we are now in must-win territory as they travel out to Charlotte this weekend. So for Lawrence behind the scenes and for Pat on this remote edition of the CHGO Fire Podcast, we will see you next week, hopefully with a win to cover, and hopefully with more positive things than negative things. Best of luck to everyone's Premier League rooting interests, to your fantasy Premier League teams. Godspeed all, and we'll see you next week.